Right, so I wanted to give just a full review of the overall card that was basically the full card of Danny Garcia versus Samuel Vargas, both the main event as well as the undercard fights. But I'll start off with the main event. Danny Garcia looked really solid. I mean, of course, we all knew that he was going in there against a guy that was, clearly overmatched in Samuel Vargas. Basically a stay busy opponent, a guy that he was basically just trying to, get into a groove with, get his feet wet again, get his body warm again in order to essentially prepare for the upcoming training camp that he's about to have in order to prepare for Keith Thurman. Garcia's right hand, especially, was landing very, very much in this fight against Vargas. I'm not sure if it was necessarily just a case of him finding a home for the right hand completely, or if it might have been a combination of that, along with the fact that Keith Thurman himself has been vulnerable to right hands in the past. If you may remember that Keith Thurman got rocked by right hands by both Jesus Soto Corraz as well as Diego Chavez. They both managed to catch him with clean overhand rights right on the chin and rock him. And matter of fact, Sean Porter was able to catch Keith Thurman with quite a few right hands as well, up on the chin. Of course, most of Porter's work was really like excellent to the body, but the occasions where he did go upstairs, it was the overhand right that it seems like Thurman is just he's a little bit open for. He needs to definitely tighten up his defense when it comes to that. But Garcia, you can't really criticize him too much for his performance. At least you can criticize him for the choice of opponent, but definitely not for the performance. He did a damn good job against Samuel Vargas. Did every bit as good as Errol Spence did. One of the guys that's kind of considered the boogeyman of boxing, not even just the division, but of pretty much the entire sport, simply because most of the top champions, the elite fighters in the weight class, simply don't even want to acknowledge his presence. But Garcia did a solid job, scored a seventh round stoppage. He had knocked him down once before that, back in the second round. Matter of fact, it looked like if Garcia really wanted to turn it up, he could have stopped it earlier before that. But he took his time, got his timing down, and he looked pretty much as good as we're normally accustomed to seeing Danny Garcia. I definitely think that he's very good at the weight. I think that he was taking a little bit something out of himself to make 140 for a little bit too long. He stayed there a little bit too long, and he's looking pretty much primed and ready to go against Keith Thurman. Matter of fact, even though I think it seems like Keith Thurman tends to be a favorite on most people's overall analysis of that fight that's going to be coming in March, I actually personally favor Danny Garcia at the moment. I think that his overall skill set is going to be just a real problem for Keith Thurman. And I think that Thurman's going to wind up making the mistake of trying to trade hooks and right hands with him at mid-range, because I think Thurman's best distance is mid-range. And although I think that Thurman does have a better inside game than Garcia and also has a better outside game, is a bit of a better mover and a little bit more defensively sound when he chooses to be, I think that the best version of himself is generally as kind of a mid-range hooker, as Dwyer would say. But the main problem with that is Danny Garcia is almost like the prototypical mid-range hooker, where like that's his range. Like if you're gonna try and beat him at that distance, I mean, God help you, because the power that he carries is insane. Like I think like the way that he throws his punches kind of reminds me a little bit of Gennady Golovkin, whereby they both have kind of that built-in leverage where Garcia doesn't even necessarily have to have his feet planted completely and be in that perfect stance in order to land his power. Anytime he throws a punch, whether it's the right overhand right cross, left hook, or even the jab, I mean, it all comes with power. He's landing everything with pure power. Thudding and explosive at the same time. You rarely get a guy that has like the thud and the pop at the same time, but he has both, the thud and the snap. And his timing is just so excellent. He's definitely got some of the best timing in the sport as well. Because even though the punches aren't necessarily coming at like as fast as like the fastest fighters in the whole sport, it's he's able to deceptively get you into that range and into that timing where he's just gonna land exactly right on you, with perfect accuracy. And it's pretty crazy to actually see him do it. Whereas with Keith Thurman, I think it's almost like his feet need to be planted. It's like he needs like a split second in order to plant his feet, then another split second in order to get the power off. When he's trying to punch on the move, the power just doesn't seem to be the same. And I think that's a big part of the reason why one time is kind of turned into one too many times, where he's not just able to lay a guy out clean, where cold cock somebody with one shot the way he was against left throw opposition, guys that weren't on the elite level. But Garcia, I think, has carried his power in a definite fashion to the elite level. So that's going to be an interesting fight. Even though I favor Garcia, I definitely don't count out Keith Thurman's chances. I think this is every bit as even of a fight as the Thurman versus Porter fight was, and I mean, hopefully the winner will fight somebody like a Sean Porter or an Errol Spence in the future. But getting to the undercard, of course, just before the main event, we had Jarrett Hurd, a rising prospect at light middleweight. You know, it's becoming an increasingly talent-heavy, talent-rich division. He went in there against Jojo Dan, and what I personally thought was a little bit of maybe a sidestep or a step down compared to fighting Oscar Molina in his last fight. Jojo Dan really isn't a very big guy. You know, it's kind of surprising to see him trying to fight at light middleweight, because Jojo Dan was really more of like a light welterweight / welterweight type of fighter. You know, you could just see it, the size difference when they actually stepped in the ring. But Jojo Dan, I mean, he gave a pretty scrappy fight, gave a scrappy account. Went in there, kind of bum rushed Hurd, was able to kind of buzz-saw him a little bit. But Hurd overall, you know, just had a overall better skill set, better technique, and he had the size advantage too. So he kind of had advantages in almost every aspect. But Jojo Dan's kind of buzzsaw style was actually giving Hurd a little bit of trouble, in spite of the fact that Hurd was landing cleanly. You know, Dan was landing a number of his own shots. And I think that may be a key to victory for some of the future opponents that Jarrett Hurd may fight. Although at light middleweight, there isn't really too many fighters that necessarily have that type of a buzzsaw style at the moment, and at least not on the elite level. You know, most of the guys tend to be more like boxer punchers or boxer mover type guys. You know, your Lawlers, your Charlos. Andrade can be a little bit of a buzzsaw when he chooses to be, so that would probably be the worst possible matchup for somebody like a Jarrett Hurd on the come up. But I think we have probably a year or so to go before he gets a world title shot anyway. But from what he looked from the way he looked, I mean, he looked pretty solid. His offensive ability is definitely there. He has an excellent amount of punch variety. Very good on the inside, in spite of the fact that he's a bit of a taller guy, a bit of a taller, rangier guy. Very good on the inside, and he has pretty good mid-range skills as well. Took care of Jojo Dan, finally knocked him out in the 6th round, or TKO'd him anyway. The corner, basically called over to the ref saying that, you know, we give up essentially. You know, that Jojo Dan wasn't really badly hurt. He was just taking a lot of flush shots. So I guess the corner just felt like, well, you know, we really don't have much of a chance, and we want to try to preserve our guy for, you know, potential future paydays that he may have in the future. So, you know, and he'll probably move back down in any case. So good win for Jarrett Hurd. And then the opener for the television portion of the PBC card was Javier Fortuna versus Omar Douglas. This was a big step up for Omar Douglas. Personally, I thought that it was a bit too big of a step up, especially since Fortuna, in spite of the fact that he's a recently deposed champion that just got knocked out by Jason Sosa, who, of course, also fought the same day. Fortuna was winning that fight up until Sosa managed to knock him out. Sosa was basically at the point of needing a knockout in order to win the fight, and he basically pulled it out the hat. You know, he pulled off the 100 run home run. You know, the 100-point 3-point shot. You know, the 100-point touchdown essentially. You know, he managed to pull it out the hat. Get rid of Fortuna. But here against Omar Douglas, you know, Fortuna came out swinging heavy, swinging fast, and Douglas managed to catch him with a clean left hook as well as a couple punches right behind that. Dropped Fortuna in the opening round. Looked like he might be able to get Fortuna out of there. Fortuna recovered pretty well, and from that point on, I thought Fortuna overall throughout most of the fight was able to just control the action. He controlled the pace, controlled the distance. His herky-jerky kind of in and out, side to side, kind of randomly generated style, like almost like a Ricardo Mayorga, but with a little bit more movement. Managed to kind of flummox Omar Douglas enough that Douglas just wasn't able to win enough rounds, basically. You know, it was a good competitive fight, but overall I think that Douglas is overall inexperience kind of harmed him here, because and also just the fact that Fortuna's got an awkward style. You know, he's a hard guy to time to begin with, because he'll give you different looks. You know, he'll completely change the way he's fighting. Sometimes he'll have his hands down, sometimes he'll have his hands up, sometimes he'll move to his right, then he'll move to his left all of a sudden. It's almost like there's no rhyme or reason for why he does what he does. He's like, you know, kind of the prototypical street fighter. You know, if Danny Garcia is the prototypical mid-range hooker, Fortuna is the prototypical street brawler. You know, he's just improvising and doing whatever kind of comes to mind at that very moment. You know, he's a very temperamental type of fighter, and even though it works against him sometimes, as it did against Jason Sosa, as it did against, you know, Patrick Hyland a few years back, it can work for him too. You know, in just making himself a confusing target and an unpredictable offensive fighter against somebody like Omar Douglas, who you know, he doesn't quite have the experience overall. You know, he went into the fight at 17-0 with 12 knockouts, and now he's 17-1 with 12 knockouts. Of course, Javier Fortuna managed to advance to 31-1-1 with 22 knockouts, and he's probably on the verge of another title shot. In a division that's very, very jam-packed with talent. 130 pounds, super featherweight, very jam-packed, talented division. You got Jose Pedraza there with the IBF title. You got the WBO titleist Vasyl Lomachenko about to fight Nicholas Walters in a couple weeks, which is an excellent, excellent fight. Of course, you still got Miguel Berchelt, who's the mandatory for the winner of that fight. WBA, you got Jason Sosa, of course, who I'll mention in another video. Jezreel Corrales, who's the super champion, who's about to rematch Takashi Uchiyama for the belt that he, of course, managed to get off of Uchiyama, mug him for, basically, with a brilliant, brutal second-round knockout. And then, of course, Francisco Vargas with the WBC belt. And, of course, even outside of the champions, you've got the aforementioned Uchiyama, you got Takashi Miura, you've got Orlando Salido, you've got Brian Vasquez, you've got, trying to think who else, Yuriorkis Gamboa's still floating around there, you've got Edner Cherry still floating around there. Just a number of really just tough fighters. You got Tozak Kokijim, of course, and just, guys that on any given night could potentially upset the apple cart, upset some of the champions, upset some of the favorites, some of the big names and all that, and who knows, some of the guys from featherweight may wind up moving up into the division as well at some point in the future. But Fortuna is a fun fighter to watch, especially against a fellow action fighter. It would be, I think, a fight between him and Vargas, should it be able to be made, between Golden Boy and PBC, would be really incredible stuff, man. Just an offensive tour de force. Or, even him versus Orlando Salido. That would be, potential fight of the year material in a major way. Him versus Miura as well, if he doesn't get a title shot. But just the overall pretty solid card, pretty fun to watch anyway. Wasn't necessarily the best card looking at it on paper, but I mean, it turned out to have some pretty interesting aspects to it and some pretty interesting prospects for the future. So that's all I got to say about this card, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.